Hey, welcome back to One Seed, One World, everybody. Please subscribe to our channel. So today I wanted to cover a little bit about fish peppers. Now, I mentioned these in a video just like a week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, where I had talked about fish peppers. But I wanted to go into more detail with the history of fish pepper and just some more information about them, and so that you can maybe look at something as an interesting plant that you can grow in your garden. So fish peppers are a spicy pepper. They, on the Scoville unit, they range from about 5,000 Scoville units up to, they can get as hot as 30,000. And it really depends on the maturity of the fruit itself, but also, you know, of course, things like the type of season you have. If you have a dry, hot season, your peppers in general are going to be hotter than what they would be like in a cooler, wet season and that sort of thing. But on average, 5,000 to 30,000 is the range that they fall in. So they have a really interesting history within the U.S., and I just thought it was important to kind of cover some of the things about the history, because they are a great part of the legacy of the African American gardens throughout history. So fish peppers, it's kind of sketchy, the information, like they're not really sure on where they came from initially, but it's believed that they came from the Caribbean. And one historian, Michael Twitty, I think his name was, believes that for like the Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay area, that they arrived there from Haiti. So around 1888, this guy who was an African American named Horace Pippin was born. He was the son of parents that were domestic workers, and his grandparents were actually slaves, you know, in the early U.S. prior to the Civil War. He was born post-Civil War after the slaves had been freed. So he, as a kid, used to enjoy drawing, all this kind of thing. And when he was like 10 years old, he won a box of crayons from a magazine drawing contest, and then he started, you know, drawing more extensively. And even in school, he would draw pictures to kind of work out like some of his spelling words and that sort of thing, to illustrate his spelling words. But then when he was like 14, he dropped out of school to help support his family. He worked as a porter at a hotel. I think he worked as an iron molder for a while, and also worked on a farm. Then in 1917, he fought in World War I. He went to France and fought in World War I, and he was severely injured with his right arm, which was his drawing, you know, coloring, painting arm. But when he came back from the war, he still dabbled in, you know, artistry, and would do like woodwork burnings, probably some early forms of wood burning work. And then in time, he decided to try oil paints. And his arm was so bad that he would actually use his left arm to guide his right arm, like while he was painting. And his first painting took him 3 years to complete. So now, none of this has to do, you know, with fish peppers necessarily, but I wanted to give you the history of Horace Pippin, who, well, we'll get to the rest of the story. So Horace Pippin also had gardens and whatnot that he grew to help support his family. And he had a neighbor by the name of H. Ralph Weaver. And Mr. Weaver was big. He was a white gentleman that was really big into, you know, during these times. Now we're up into like the 1930s, Depression era, and he was very involved in self-sustainability. He had, at one point, one of the most prolific cottage or kitchen gardens in Pennsylvania. He lived in the Westchester area, and Horace Pippin became his neighbor. Back in those days, people used bees and bee stings to basically be as a remedy for arthritis. Like to get stung by bees was supposed to help your arthritis. So Horace Pippin wanted to use some of the bees from H. Ralph Weaver that Weaver had to get, stung by the bees to help the pain in his arm and whatnot that he was experiencing from his World War I injury. So he traded seeds to Mr. Weaver to, in return, to get the bee stings, basically. And Mr. Weaver was a big seed saver. He was huge into heirloom seeds, collecting seeds, and creating like a whole kind of seed exchange. And he saved all these seeds. And one of the seeds that Horace Pippin gave to Ralph Weaver were fish pepper seeds. And they were then later discovered by the grandson, who then got them on seed exchange or seed saver exchanges, and now you can get the seeds. But all the initial fish pepper seeds, or all the descendants of the fish pepper seeds that we have now, all came from Horace Pippin. And he also continued with his artwork and paintings up until the time of his death. He really didn't start to get famous until right before he died, but a lot of his paintings are still available, and you can see them in different museums and whatnot. But he is the one that kind of, between him and Mr. Weaver, with that initial trade, they used to have lunches together. And I can only imagine like some of the discussions they used to have where, maybe Horace and Ralph were discussing, growing gardens and the bees and all this kind of thing. And then making that trade was like, hey, I'll give you some of these fish pepper seeds if you let your bees sting me a few times to help my arm. So I thought that was a really interesting back history to where the seeds originated from. So going from that, fish peppers were very popular in the African American communities, especially along like the Baltimore area, Philadelphia, Chesapeake Bay, Delaware River areas. And they were used a lot in recipes for seafoods, hence the name fish peppers, especially when they were younger. They're more mild, and the fish pepper will start off as like a light green to a cream color, then it will get like a white and green stripe, and then as it matures, it will become yellow and red. The flavor enhances, the color enhances, also the spiciness will become more prolific as the fruit matures on the vine or on the plant. The plants themselves, the leaves, have variegated leaves, or like a white and green mix. So they're a fairly easy pepper to grow. They do need full sun, and they are just a beautiful plant to have in your garden. Then, they have multiple uses. So here's another thing. 1 in every 50 fish peppers lacks chlorophyll. So they always stay like that pale color. And that's one of the reasons why early chefs would use them in like cream sauces for fish dishes, because they wouldn't impart any color into the dish, but would give you the flavor. They would still, keep that cream color for the fish dish without, changing the color of it. So I thought that was kind of cool. But, you can dry them. You can make dry rubs out of them. You can add them into your cream sauces or whatnot for fish dishes. And a lot of the early recipes that most likely included fish peppers, they don't specifically mention the fish pepper, because during those times from the late 1800s to like 1930s, a lot of this was specifically used in the African American communities, and they weren't writing cookbooks even with the the different caterers and cooks that worked back then, they just passed down the recipes orally. And so there's a couple mentions of using a spicy pepper in the different dishes, but it doesn't specifically mention the fish pepper. But it is believed, because they were so prolific in the African American gardens in that region, that that was the pepper that was being used at that time. And then, during the 1930s to 40s, the fish pepper kind of started losing its popularity as the African American community started to move in that area, started moving more out of the agriculture, type of farming or doing the kitchen gardens and that sort of thing. It became less used, and it almost became extinct until Ralph Weaver's grandson found this whole big batch of not only fish pepper seeds, but all these heirloom seeds in his grandfather's freezer after his grandfather had passed away. Found all these heirloom seeds, and then that's when he started sharing them. And then they started to be sold on different heirloom exchanges. Baker Creek is one of those. Seed Savers Exchange and others started perpetuating the seed again and bringing it back to the forefront. And now, there's a lot of restaurants, more specifically probably along the East Coast, that have rediscovered the fish pepper and are using it in their dishes and restaurants and whatnot. And now some of us local gardeners and small-time gardeners are also discovering what a great plant it is and what a beautiful plant it is to grow in your garden. So check out the fish pepper. It is a beautiful plant. It's a nice spicy pepper, changes multiple colors, so it's going to give some cool color to your garden as you go throughout the season, whether it starts off with the green and the white all the way up through the yellow and the reds. And then you can choose when you want to pick it to get the level of spiciness you want. And then if you want to keep the spiciness lower, pick it early, or make sure that your garden is better watered during drought seasons, because that's going to increase your Scoville units over time. So that's about it for the fish pepper. Thanks for stopping by and checking out another video, and we will see you again soon. But whatever's going on in your neck of the woods, in your gardens, and in your homesteads, I hope it is all going fantastic for you. I hope you have a fantastic day. See you again soon. Namaste.